Joining me here on the Gray Area podcast. So excited to have this guest on with me. He is a terrific writer, covers all things DFW sports, and much like myself, he's a pro wrestling fan.
Yes,
Mike
sir.
Piellucci, Mike Piellucci of DMagazine joining me here on the Gray Area podcast. Mike, what's going on?
How are you, my man?
I'm doing well, man. I appreciate you taking the time with me. Before we got on, I was like, I need to talk to somebody about all things DFW sports because I feel like, Mike, I don't know about you, there's just a lot going on right now. The Rangers are playing well. The Stars in the Western Conference Final, although Game 3 we won't talk
Right.
about. The Cowboys, got their thing that they're doing, and of course, the Mavericks are always top of mind for guys like you and me. But what is your just kind of overall sense of the DFW sports landscape as it is right now?
I mean, I would say two words, right? One is intriguing in that you talk about those four teams specifically. And even if you want to get further down the ladder, right, you're talking about the Wings and FC Dallas. Those are
Mm-hmm.
six teams that are all five of those have been in the playoffs in the last 2 years. The sixth is the Rangers, who are, if you had a bet on which team is got the best trajectory in the city right now, I'd say it's them or the Stars. So there's nobody that's boring. There's nobody that's totally bottomed out. And as a result, yeah, that's why we're talking about this right now. Even though the Mavericks haven't actually played for more than a month, disappointed, they're still conversation fodder, right? Because it's the Mavericks. The Cowboys, yeah, they haven't gotten over the hump and they'll just piss us all off in the fall, but they're still good. They're winning games.
Yeah.
There's no reason to think they're not going to be in the playoff hunt. You have the Stars who, for me, as brutal as last night was, I still think they're ahead of schedule. You know, the fact that they won two series this year after looking so stalled out a year ago, this is all trending in the right direction there. And then the Rangers, man, I mean, yeah, the bullpen is just a gas fire all the time, but everything else is just about as good as you could hope for it to be. So it's an intriguing time, and I would say it's a successful time for the same reasons of like, there's no team that we're sitting here going, well, don't have to worry about them for 3 years. So yeah, as a result, it makes for a very interesting line of work for people like you and me who are attuned to everything, right? You know, and obviously if you're a specialist, then your life is great too because you don't have a bad
Mm-hmm.
team to cover. But yeah, there's just so much every day. There's something different to pay attention to in the city. That's what makes it fun.
How do you go about covering all of this? Because with your role over at D Magazine, obviously there's a lot to pay attention to. There's a lot of moving parts. For you, what is your approach to the game in terms of your ability to not only manage this, but also in terms of your writing and how you go about putting this stuff together for us to be able to consume and be able to take in?
Yeah, you know, I'm still figuring it out, to be honest. So this is the second full year that Strong Side, which is the name of our sports vertical, has been operational at D Magazine. And prior to me coming aboard in 2021 in the summertime, they never had a full-time sports editor. So they would have some incredibly well done features, but they would kind of be one-offs. And trying to figure out what the workflow is like. You know, last year was the first year that I just did it for the first time. And then this year, you know, the challenge that really comes for me is, so my title is sports editor, but in reality, I probably have about two or three different jobs. You know, it's my job to recruit all the writers and create all the budgets and make sure that all of the, we have a plan all the time. Then there's the nitty gritty line/feature editing part of me, which I have some help there. But, you know, I'm still, every piece we're doing, I've got eyes on. I'm editing it on a line by line level. And then there's writer Mike, where I'm not just writing the things that are timely in the moment, but, you know, I've been consumed for the last several weeks for a story on cricket, because cricket is coming to the United States this summer, and it's now the second most popular sport in the world. And Dallas is going to be the hub of this great American experiment, because we are the only place in the country that has, you know, out of the six markets that they're going to, we're the only place that has a world-class stadium. And that's the old, if you're a minor league baseball fan, you know the Texas Air Hogs, which are out in Grand Prairie by the racetrack. Well, they've been dead for a few years. That they had an Air Hog Stadium was, you know, the name of the park. It's just been chilling there. And so cricket came in and remodeled that, and now it's going to be a cricket hub. So as this has all been going on, I've had probably, you know, especially with the Rangers, I'm sitting here, got some Rangers things, pieces I want to do. But I've been buried writing a 4,000 word magazine story while doing all of the Stars playoff writing until this past series, because I was out of town this past weekend. So I took this series off, and maybe it's my fault because I wrote about the first two and everything's been fine. Now I don't write.
The minute you leave, here we
the minute I
go.
freelance that out, things fall apart. So it was a lot of hockey writing, it's a lot of cricket writing, it's a lot of the day-to-day management. And yet I'm sitting here going, man, I wish I was on the Rangers a little more than I have been. So, it's a work in progress. Right now, for instance, the beautiful part of what we do at D is, we're not, I always tell people, like, look, we're not competing with the Athletic. We're not competing with the papers because one, our resources, our focus are different, right? It's me in a huge freelance team versus multiple people on staff. So we're not going to pretend that we're at every single game because we can't be. But two, our focus is different. We're focusing on those bigger picture things, whether it's bigger story, whether it's finding time to do something fun, because I feel like we need more fun in sports around here. Whether it's just the top-down view of everything that's happening versus the nitty-gritty all the time. And so as a result, I always tell people, hey, read the morning news, read The Athletic, read us, read the Star-Telegram. There's great work to be done everywhere. And you as a sports fan, why shouldn't you engage in as much as possible, right? So there are times now that I'm sitting here going, like, because I got to be a little more selective about what we do, we haven't done a ton of Cowboys stuff lately. And there's a temptation to say, well, it's the Cowboys. You got to be doing more. You got to be doing more. But what's nice is that working here, we don't have to force it as much because there's not the expectation that we're everywhere on everything at all at once. And it's not a lot going on with the Cowboys after the draft for a minute, So like,
that's true.
I don't know. So there's a part of me that's going, should we do more Cowboys coverage? And there's another part of me that says, hey, our audience is smart. I think one of the things that they've latched onto, or I hope at least, is like, we're not going to waste their time. If you're reading something on our site, it's not clickbaity. It's good stuff. So why am I going to shove things down your throat that are Cowboys related right now when, like, you're probably not thinking a ton about the Cowboys. You're thinking about all these other teams, and frankly, there's nothing going on. So
it's true.
So like maybe I should be doing more. That's kind of that push and pull that I'm still learning. But for right now, for us, what it's been like, as the long-winded way of answering your question, it's been a lot of stars. Not just because that's been the story, but also because a lot of outlets in the city are cutting Stars coverage, and we're just ramping it up. A year ago, David Castillo, who was our first Stars writer and is brilliant, David is the only guy there other than whatever I was doing. Well, now we have Robert Tiffin, who, if you were, a Stars blog reader, Robert was the king of Stars blog writing. By day, he is an educator in Irving. So he kind of went into semi-retirement. I coached him out of semi-retirement. He's doing stuff for us. And then Sean Shapiro, who's one of my best friends in the business, when I was at The Athletic, I edited him. And if you're a Stars fan, you know that Sean was the best beat writer, bar none, hands down. He's since moved on to national things, but since he's been back in the open market after leaving The Athletic, I told him, I was like, bro, if you want to do Stars coverage, you tell me. And I think anytime Sean and I can work together, we're going to work together. And so having all three of those guys in the mix, and then me kind of jumping in a bit more in the playoffs, we feel that, there isn't a team of 4 people in town that can do all the stuff that we can. So let's hit that hard. Let's show people that we are growing Stars coverage. It is a lot of Rangers coverage because we've got Jamie Newberg, who speaks for himself. And then this year we've had the great Sean Bass from the Ticket jumping in and helping us out. And throwing some Mavs stuff too, because, hey, it may be a disaster, but it's an entertaining disaster. And it's a topical disaster, KG. You know that. So I think those 3 things have been kind of top of mind right now, plus ramping up Wings coverage now that they're back too. That's kind of been how it's been. And I think the fun part will be, once this playoff run with the Stars is over, how do we fill the summertime? Because last year, look, the Rangers were done by July. Beginning of July, it's over.
That's true.
And so we've got to write, but everybody in town's angry. Angrier than I thought they'd be, to be honest, for the fact that I think we all knew it was still ramping up. I got still a lot of residual bitterness, but this summer it's gonna be fun to see. All right, well, where do we take this now that we should have, barring a huge collapse, a Rangers pennant race, in addition to the Mavs off-season drama that's going to be aplenty, in addition to what are the Stars going to do to tinker to take this to another level, in addition to, once we hit July, the Cowboys stuff will be moving, and then, FC Dallas and the Wings, who should be playoff teams again if things go according to plan.
So it's going to be a lot that's going to be taking place this summer. Yes. And it's funny because you mentioned, kind of the collection of writers that you have, and we'll touch on the Mavericks here in a little bit. But one of my favorites is Todd Franco. Love his work. One of the best basketball minds that I've come across, and just love his coverage of the Mavericks. But before we get there, you started to touch on the Rangers, because for those who are Rangers fans and have watched this team perform the way that they have so far, they've taken a little bit different route than I think we've seen for teams in a little bit, which is they're trying to spin their way to the top. Now, we've seen teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers and others be able to do so, but that was a lot built on actual postseason success that they had. The Rangers are like, look, we're going to go get Simeon. We're going to get Seager. then we're going to get Jacob deGrom. We're going to spend our way there while also allowing this young talent that we have in what's a terrific minor league system be able to come up and work with these guys as time goes on. Are you surprised at how quickly Chris Young has been able to really kind of turn this thing around, given some of the plan and what he was having to deal with when he first got here?
I would say a tad, yeah. It's hard not to be, right? And to your point, it only works if the farm system is where it is, because it's, how baseball works. You can only win so much with a third of a lineup. And yeah, Seager, Marcus Semien has been as advertised basically after the first 2.5 months of last year, right? Marcus Semien quietly had a really good second half. It looked like Marcus Semien. And now we've seen Marcus Semien pick up where he left off. Corey Seager was just, and you and I talked about this on the fan. Corey Seager was just really unlucky last year. If you look at all the stuff underneath the hood, Corey Seager was playing like Corey Seager. And I'm not a betting man, Kevin, but if I was going to bet, I would have bet on a monster season. And that's exactly what we're getting right now. But this doesn't happen if, I've had a running joke on the site that I'm the charter member of the Nathaniel Lowe Appreciation Society, because ever since he was back in Tampa, I was going, why is this guy not getting opportunities? This dude can hit. And when Texas traded for him, I was very convinced it's like, this is going to pan out well. I don't think he's quite the guy he was last year, but even producing maybe about 10% less offense, which is essentially what he's kind of doing right now, that's still an upper echelon first baseman in the American League. We're going to talk about the defense, right? We don't want to. This is a happy time in this podcast. We're going to talk about defense. We're not doing that. But Jonah Heim. I mean, Jonah Heim. I liked that deal when it happened, just because I figured, okay, Elvis Andrus, we all love him down here. He's a franchise icon. Doesn't have a lot left in the tank. If Jonah Heim's a backup catcher who's cost controlled, that's a win. Jonah Heim looks like one of the best catchers in the American League right now. And there are some of these guys, Ezekiel Duran. We all love Ezekiel Duran. If you look at the plate discipline, there's going to be regression. Ezekiel Duran's walking about 2% of the time. That's not going to last. We're going to get some growing pains with Ezekiel Duran. I'm not totally sure what can still be dependent on offensively from Leody Taveras. But everything we're seeing from Jonah Heim is real. And suddenly, when you have that, you have Josh Young, who another guy whose plate discipline needs to improve a bit, but a lot of pedigree there. You're talking about the best infield in the American League, right? Between those four infielders and Jonah Heim and Adolis Garcia, a guy who I literally wrote a
He's so good.
He is. And I wrote a piece about him last year. And I think the headline was, I've given up trying to understand Adolis Garcia. Because I just don't. But to his credit, the thing that I never thought he would do is what he's doing now. And that plate discipline that's the only thing he ever lacked, right? We knew about the power. We knew about the speed. We knew about the arm. We knew about the ground he could cover, especially playing right versus center. But he's getting on base and he's being selective. And if you have that, that's a star player right there, a pure star. And suddenly we are talking about at least 2/3 of this lineup that is really good. And only 2 of those guys are the super high priced imports. So I think that's a surprise. And then, to their credit with the rotation, I like the fact that they didn't rest on their laurels. And, I was a little wrong about this. I was the one who's saying, why are you buying more starting pitching if this farm system is allegedly more deep in starting pitching than it's ever been? Well, you know what? Look who they brought in. DeGrom is DeGrom. He's not pitching right now, but there's nothing to dissuade us from the best pitcher alive when he's out there. Anthony Eovaldi, I mean, that's the story of the city right now. It's how good has this guy been? And I think he's following that track of, I'm a big believer that certain franchises have skills. The Mavericks for a while, for instance, when they were in their heyday, when they won the title, their big skill was they could do 2 things. 1, they could kind of win trades. And 2, they could take so many guys that were cast-offs elsewhere, right? Your Brandon Basses, your Brandon Wrights, your Raymond Felton turned into a good point guard. Your guys who they didn't create stars out of this, but they got reliable rotation cogs out of people that nobody else wanted. Desana Job, Ian Mahinmi. There were 15 guys over a dozen-year period like that. The Rangers' big skill for the last 10 years, really more like, to be fair, like a half dozen. Lance Lynn, Mike Minor, Kyle Gibson. Now we're seeing it with Nathan Eovaldi. I think John Gray was on that track last year when he was healthy. Mid-rotation guys who looked like a 4 or a 3 elsewhere, and they look like a 3 or a 2 here. Not an ace, not necessarily the front of the line guy, although Eovaldi's pitching like that right now. But take these okay starting pitchers and make them good to very good. And when you have that, and you have an ace of all aces in Jacob deGrom, and you've got minor league depth behind that, look, it's suddenly this team, its strength is starting pitching. That's never happened in our lifetime, but that is a thing. So when you put that together and they have one of the best managers alive, it makes sense. Even if I had a conversation, we did a little back and forth with Jamie Newberg of the site, him and I, before the year. And I told him, I said, man, I trust one man in this bullpen. And it was at the time it was Brock Burke. And now it's just Will Smith. But the fact that we are 2 months into this thing and I still trust one man in this bullpen, not the best. And Jamie wrote about that yesterday about how we all know the deal. They've got to throw some resources to fix this because that's maybe the only area where they're not deep in the minors. But still, if a year ago, when this team had holes all over the place, and I'm sitting here going, how are they going to microwave this thing? And now we're sitting here going, they only have one hole, and that one hole is probably the easiest thing to fix. That's a massive win for Chris Young. There's no question.
Yeah, this team is playing terrific baseball, one of the best run differentials in the game right now. Rotation is really good. Waiting on Jacob deGrom to get back. Hopefully when he gets back in June, hopefully this Rangers ball club will continue to play well the way that they have been. And Bruce Bochy, give him a lot of credit, a calming, stabilizing force for this team. Of course, 3-time World Series champion, has done very well so far for this Rangers team. They're a lot of fun to watch. Real quick on that Adolis Garcia thing. It's so wild because this was a player whom the Rangers didn't even want at one point, and he's turned himself into an all-star player. It's just amazing to see what kind of patience, if you have it with a guy, sometimes that can be rewarded. And I think Adolis Garcia is a terrific example of that, given what he's done so far, because I don't know why base runners continue to try Adolis Garcia when it comes to his arm.
Bad idea.
It's a bad idea to try Adolis in his arm these days. As we turn our attention to another team that's going to be going through some changes this offseason, and a team that's near and dear to our hearts, it's the Dallas Mavericks. We were mentioning Iztok Franco a little bit earlier and the terrific work that he does. He's going to have a lot to write about this offseason because okay, there's so many directions we could go here, but I just want to start with this one because Kyrie Irving, it's ironic that we're doing this today because Kyrie Irving was out on IG Live talking about, look, I'm going to take my time on my free agency decision. And I'm sure the Mavericks were like, well, thanks, Kyrie. Thanks.
Love that. Big fan of that.
Exactly. You take your time. We'll be here. But this all starts and ends with having to bring him back, right? Because otherwise, where does this go if you're the Mavericks? Yes, they have the number 10 overall pick in June's NBA draft, but it all starts and ends with him coming back to this team, right?
I'll make the slight addendum that it all starts and ends with him coming back or not losing it for nothing. If it's a Jalen Brunson scenario, then yeah, the ship is sinking, right? It's taking on water fast. It's not going to get better. But, and I've always been, I've seen all the reporting floating around, and I don't doubt that it is accurate reporting at the time it's being reported. I'm just one who, when I see these stories floating around about how they expect him back and he expects to, and he won't have options and all that. What did we learn a year ago? We all expected Jalen Brunson to be back. All it takes is one team. And if you are, let's say, the Phoenix Suns, and you are Matt Ishbia, and you are making a splash as an owner, and you're already doing big things, and you've watched how Chris Paul is disintegrating and can't play anymore, and you have Kevin Durant, who I don't know why Kevin still likes playing with Kyrie, and maybe he doesn't behind the scenes, but he's continually supported him time and again in public, over and over and over again. Well, what if Kevin calls Kyrie and says, get over here, man? And suddenly there's the sign and trade route. Or if you're the Los Angeles Lakers and all of a sudden you feel like you go from feeling a journey similar to what the Stars might be like if they're swept tomorrow night. 2 weeks ago, we're sitting here going, this Lakers thing is going great. Look how good the vibes are. This is fun. And then they get just demolished. And now LeBron is teasing retirement. Who's to say LeBron has to go to the front office and say, listen, you remember how I told you to get me Kyrie? Did you see this series when nobody but me could create offense consistently? Figure out a sign and trade, get him here. All it takes is one of them to get Kyrie, and Kyrie's tied with both of them, and then it's a deal where a bunch of people are blowing up Nico Harrison's phone and saying, listen, this is what we want to happen, figure out the sign and trade. That's not the ideal outcome, but if Dallas gets assets back, it's not a disaster. It's not a Jalen Brunson level disaster. So yeah, it's such a narrow path for it to feel good because it's not just keeping him. It's if you keep him, then the stress starts because he did everything right when he was here. This collapse was not on Kyrie Irving at all, right? Every indication was behind the scenes. He was, being a great guy on the floor. He was their best player down the stretch, not Luka Doncic. He was fantastic. I mean, man even created a huge pain in their ass by winning that Sacramento game, making them sweat about keeping that lottery pick, right? He doesn't do that. They lose. They got like a 4% chance to lose the pick. Everybody's happy. But Kyrie Irving had every incentive to play nice. We all know this. So what happens if he gets his money? And he has no incentive to do anything but what he wants to do from here on out because they're stuck with him. well, then what? If Kyrie Irving goes the Rasheed Wallace route, and that's what I wrote, the day of the trade, I did 1,900 words on the site about how I thought, and I still do think this will end badly in some capacity. But if he becomes Rasheed Wallace in Detroit, where he just becomes that beloved elder statesman and he's still incredibly talented, then hell yeah, you make that trade 100 times out of 100. But there is the possibility he leaves for nothing, which I don't necessarily think would happen. I don't think the teams that have cap space really want him. I think if he leaves, it's sign and trade. But he leaves for nothing, or he leaves in sign and trade, and the assets you get back don't perform. Or he stays and he gets hurt, or he stays and he gets hurt and he's upset about something, versus just this narrow band of he stays and he's healthy and he's awesome. I get why they did this, because desperate teams do desperate things, but there's risk. So does it have to be him coming back? If you get a sign and trade out of this, you get pieces. I don't think that's a disaster. It's not, there's still a way this could all work out, even if he goes. It just can't be Jalen Brunson, where he's gone for nothing. And then in effect, you moved 3 nice pieces at the trade deadline for literally nothing in return when the team was already threadbare. That will not work.
Yeah, it's interesting because for those who don't remember the whole Steve Nash saga, when he eventually left Dallas, they were reminded very well of when Jalen Brunson left for New York, in a lot of ways, how that went down between the Mavericks and Jalen Brunson, and what he has obviously done since going to New York. But it's interesting now because you look at what the Mavericks have from an asset perspective with the number 10 pick, Kyrie and his looming free agency that's out there. All of this, Mike, centers around a timeline of a 24-year-old superstar who is a 4-time first-team All-NBA selection. And I've tried to couch this for other people who, say, hey, Kevin, how do you describe what's going on? I say, look, it's not Luka's fault per se. I just feel like the Mavericks, and like a lot of us, didn't realize he would get this good this fast, and he has sped up a timeline that I don't think even this organization was prepared for, and honestly are still trying to catch up with, based on even what the success that he's had so far. Would you agree or disagree with that?
100%. Yeah. So in addition to what I do at D, I co-host 77 Minutes, which is the Dallas Mavericks podcast at The Athletic with Tim Cato and Austin Garuya and Dave DeFore. And Tim and I keep meaning to do this show. We're going to do it at some point, really going through all of it. The thing that killed them, if you look at most of these teams they get compared to, they all had multiple lottery picks. And yeah, they traded, they traded a couple picks to Kristaps Porzingis, although I think a lot of people retroactively ding them for that. At the time, it was a good process. I didn't see many people who did not like that deal. But the thing that killed them was that they didn't think, nor could they have predicted that, you're right that, they didn't have a plan as an organization, and that should be, they should take some heat for that too. But a lot of these other teams that got really good didn't have a plan either. They just stacked a bunch of lottery picks and let the talent decide the rest, right? Look at some of these teams that are left. You have 2 top 5 picks in Boston, in Tatum and Jaylen Brown. You know when that's happened in Dallas? Never. Back-to-back like that didn't happen. It's never happened here. You look at you look at Denver. Yeah, they got an outlier in Jokic, but they had Jamal Murray. They had Michael Porter Jr. They had assets that they could flip to go get Aaron Gordon. You look at Cleveland, which is for me the next upcoming power in the East. Holy crap, Cleveland had so many lottery picks because they were terrible forever. They get compared to Phoenix down here. Well, Phoenix had Mikal Bridges and Phoenix had DeAndre Ayton, and they had Devin Booker as a late lottery guy because Devin Booker took 4 years to get to where he's at. They had time to stack more assets. Luka was an All-NBA player in year 2.
Yes, that's right.
Listen, everybody here, who's a Luka Doncic fan, who rightfully says our superstar is better than your superstar, because he is in almost every case. Well, the implications of that fast forward to the timeline. And so there's so little margin for error. And look, this isn't to let the organization off the hook, because when there's little margin for error, you better nail the margin calls. And they have missed a lot of them. But a lot of other teams in their position probably can miss some of those margin calls and still be fine because they get those big assets. And that's why, for me, all those people who were sitting there was that undercurrent of discourse. I'm sure you saw it about when Miami was making their run this year. Well, maybe the Mavericks could have snuck in and done that. No, they couldn't have. They absolutely couldn't have. If you watched this team, you knew they were capable of that. And what would that have really gotten them? You win a round for pride. A top 10 pick on this team that's starving for talent is way more valuable to the big picture. And the big picture, unfortunately, for better or for worse, Luka's timeline keeps them hostage. Is Luka happy? That's the whole enterprise. That's it. It's kind of exhausting, to to follow most of the time, to be honest, right? Because like this is a sport where there's fewer players than anywhere else. And I think it's the most groupthink sport out of the big four in town where everybody values everything the same. It's so hard to maneuver. The cap is difficult to maneuver around. And so every team's got like 2 or 3 moves to make in like a half decade span when you get the guy. And so the season is not short. So you're sitting here for 7 months out of the year, just like, I mean, man, midway through the year last year, people were just,
they were over it. They were over it.
Well, I mean, it was obviously at the end it got bad, but there was that right around the new year. You remember what I'm talking about? Before they had that big surge afterwards, and then the Kyrie trade ramped the intrigue up. Like late last year to early this year, everybody was so upset about it.
Yes.
I remember when around the statue when it was getting unveiled, the Dirk statue, and I was doing an episode of our podcast, and I made a joke, and it was purely a joke. You're a wrestling guy, so you'll get this. I made the joke about how when the Mavs vibes were bad, they brought out Dirk like WWE when they don't mint any stars. Everybody's mad. It's like, hey, Cena's coming back this week, guys.
That's right. Nostalgia come on back. That's right.
Get Goldberg out. What's Bill doing? And so I made this joke. And then, dude, Mavs Twitter was just like taking it seriously. They're like, see, they're finally talking about it. They know the truth. And I'm like, guys, it's a joke. I promise it's a joke. Because, I was making it in the context of the statue reveal. And they're like, yeah, great time to reveal the statue. And the team's awful. And nobody wants people to think about it. I'm like, you know how much planning goes into this from every level? That's like at least half a year in advance that any of this stuff gets set. Like this isn't a thing that you can just pivot on a dime when, the team's terrible, bump up the statue and build. It doesn't go like that.
The time it just happened to work out the way that it did based off of what was happening to the team at the time. It's just this team is so fascinating given all the success that they had just a season ago, getting to the Western Conference Final, and then things going completely the other direction this year, obviously with injury and inconsistency. Defense was bad. So many things that have to get fixed for this team that we could do a whole 2-hour show just talking about what they would need to do to get things turned around.
It's funny because the vibes completely flipped with them and the Stars. Because this time last year, the Mavs were going to the Western Conference Finals. They were the team on the up and up. The Stars looked so stagnant. It wasn't just that they lost that first round series against Calgary. It was like they had no plan other than let Jake Ottinger bail you out and hope to counterattack. It was brutal. And they looked like a team, Sagan and Ben looked really bad. And, Jason Robertson hadn't made that next jump yet. Rope Hintz, I feel like, really made another jump this year. Miro Heiskanen was in a system that constrained his talents. Wyatt Johnston wasn't around yet. And you're going, man, this team looks stuck in the middle. I don't know how they get out of this. And now we're here where the Stars, they got some issues. I think that blue line after Heiskanen and, Thomas Harley's a piece, but you need more. You got to work at the defense. But, man, there's a lot to be excited about with that team. And with the Mavs, it's not that there isn't a lot to be excited about because you're one of the 5 best guys in the game. And if Kyrie comes back and stays, then probably one of the other 20 best. But there's a lot where we're all sitting here just going, oh, the vibes are so bad.
Oh man, yeah, that's a great point because the thing has flipped from a year ago for both of those squads in context of playoff success to see where they are now. Before we get out of here, we can't not touch on, obviously, we touched on the Rangers, the success that they're having. The Mavericks got a difficult offseason upcoming. The Stars are doing their thing to a point. Let's see what happens, for the rest of the series. Although I will say on the Stars real quick, when they hired Peter DeBoer, I was like, oh, so they want to score a lot of goals. And that's exactly what this team did, scoring a ton of goals. I think this was a top 10 team in both goals for and goals against. Like they were one of the more complete teams in the game throughout the course of the season. It's just sad to see how things have kind of just unraveled in the Vegas Golden Knights series at this point.
It has, but they won 2 playoff series, after they looked, they got beat last year. They didn't make the playoffs the year before. Like this is going in the right direction. Yeah. Pavelski, is going to be 39, but should we doubt Joe Pavelski still doing what he's doing after the playoffs he's had since coming back from the Minnesota series, right? There's a lot of young pieces here. There's, Logan Stankoven's going to come up next year and be what Wyatt Johnston was this year. Jim Nill, I think you have to assume still has his fastball. The guy's been fantastic at balancing this timeline of the veterans, but the young kids. To me, they're ahead of schedule. I really am not worried about this team. I think this is a success. Unfortunately, the way they're going out puts a huge damper on everything, but I don't think the vibes should be bad here at all. Everybody's upset, and certainly the Jamie Benn fiasco last night ain't gonna make anybody feel good. But big picture, this thing is moving in the right direction. So that brings us to our favorite albatross in town, the Dallas Cowboys. I think that's where you're going, right?
That's right. That's right. Because as much as these teams have success, I think, and you know this better than anybody, the one thing that this whole Metroplex is still starving for, really the state of Texas, if we're going to go there, is another Super Bowl championship, which obviously has not happened for the better part of 2.5 decades at this point. 2 disappointing losses in back-to-back years to the San Francisco 49ers. How do you feel about this team in the direction that they're going in, with Mike McCarthy now taking over play calling duties, Kellen Moore no longer here? How are you feeling about the state of the Cowboys based on where they are and what they've done this offseason?
I don't know, man.
That's a great way to start. I know it, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's important to note that it's very easy to group those 2 playoff losses under the same umbrella. For me, they were very different. Mm-hmm. 2 years ago, they had a really good roster that to me was very complete, and they got outcoached. And that loss was entirely on Mike McCarthy. Last year, that was a talent problem, more than anything else. And they had 2 offensive playmakers, and Tony Pollard goes down before halftime. And what else do they have? What else are they going to do? So to me, I liked what they did before the draft. I think this is the best pre-draft offseason they've had in years. I don't think anybody can dispute that, right? Brandon Cooks can really play. I do buy that Michael Gallup will be healthier than he was last year, and
same.
Even if he's not, Michael Gallup doing what he did last year as the third guy is very different than the second guy. The Stephon Gilmore thing was brilliant. I know draftniks didn't necessarily love their draft. Listen, I will bag on the Cowboys all day long. I know you do too. We'll keep it 100 with the Cowboys, but I am not, until proven otherwise, questioning a Dallas Cowboys draft. I don't care what the people in the media say. I do not care what people who follow the draft say, even though they are much smarter about it than me. This team is proven to be really good at that. Will McClay is great at his job. Until I don't see a draft where 3 or 4 guys come out of the woodwork and become key pieces for them, just going to take them at their word that it's going to be fine, So, yeah, I mean, if you look at the roster, it's probably better than last year's roster, even though this whole we're heading towards the same thing at left guard that we were doing a year ago at wide receiver, where it's like, yeah, it's fine. We've got solutions. No, you don't. Yeah, it's fine. Listen to us. Trust us. You're lying again. No. It's cool. It's cool. And then, 3 weeks in a camp, we're going to be going, who the hell is the left guard of this team?
That's right.
And that's especially precarious when, I'm a USC Trojan, Kevin. So I love Tyron Smith. That's a guy who I've seen play his entire career. The guy is the greatest offensive tackle ever play in the city, because I'm counting Larry Allen as a guard for this exercise, right? Greatest offensive tackle ever play here. We all know the deal. You just can't depend on him to be healthy all the time. Terrence Steele's coming off an ACL injury. They're talking about one of them playing guard again, which the only one who can really do that is Tyler Smith. And why in God's name would you, if this is your left tackle of the future, why would you mess around with that? Why would you not give him more snaps to develop there? Because he is the future of this offensive line. So you've got a problem at left guard. You could also see a world in which Tyron Smith gets hurt early. Could happen. And Terrence Steele isn't up to speed yet. And then you have a tackle issue too. They are banking, as they always are, on Zach Martin continuing to be incredible. And at some point, you can't do that anymore. It can go quick when you're an offensive lineman in your 30s who doesn't get snaps. So, I could see a world at which there is some unsteady footing on offense. I don't trust Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer calling plays. There's never been an NFL team that has been thrilled about Brian Schottenheimer in their offensive play construction. It doesn't happen. Even if, this to me was the monkey's paw curling of, we want Kellen Moore out. We're tired of Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore, I feel like was always very streaky. There were moments when he looked like a genius, moments when he overthought things. I didn't think he made things easy on his playmakers sometimes, in terms of just doing small scheme things to get them open versus depending on talent, which made Dak Prescott's job harder than it should have been. But Kellen Moore got results. And I think we're about to see this year what Kellen Moore does with Justin Herbert. I think the Chargers have a really good year. Woo.
Oh, man. Woo. Let Kellen Moore and that offense start scoring 35 points a game with Justin Herbert and all that offense.
Yeah.
And Cowboys fans going to be looking around like, this is who you got rid of? This is the guy you
Right, yeah. It's all fun and games complaining about Kellen until you get a Schottenheimer offense, and then you see what Kellen's going to do on the West Coast. So, I mean, my honest thought is they're going to be a playoff team. There aren't other than Philly and San Francisco, I don't think there's a team that you can definitively say is more talented than them. I love what they look like on the defensive side of the ball, especially with Dan Quinn back. Talent-wise, it's another double-digit win team. But we're just going to do the same thing we do, where for 3.5 months, what's it going to matter? I hate to say it, I hate to put them in the same trope as we do the NBA regular season, where it's like, okay, well, how much does this matter? This team is going to, barring huge injuries, and it's possible. But even as I bag on what a Schottenheimer McCarthy offense could look like, it's still a playoff team, still a playoff offense. I think Tony Pollard, if he's healthy, when he really needs a payday and he's getting full snaps with as explosive as he is, Tony Pollard's going to be incredible this year. Oh my God, Tony Pollard's going to be good this year. So it's going to be a really good team, and they get to the playoffs, and then we're going to see what they've learned. Because it's going to be twofold. Then it's one, if you run into Philly or San Francisco again, I don't trust the team to beat Philly at all. I don't trust them to beat San Francisco, although that's at least a little more doable because they took some hits this offseason. So it's who do you play, and then do you trust Mike McCarthy to coach his way out of something? And by all indications, everything we know about Mike McCarthy is, pragmatically brought in to win these big games because he's never really been the guy in anything else, right? Nobody says he's a master motivator. Nobody said he's the single greatest offensive, schematics guy, even if he's a good one. He's brought in to win these games. We haven't seen him win the games yet. So I don't know, man. This isn't a cop-out, I promise. I just don't know what to think about them until I see them in a high-pressure postseason environment again. And the last 27 years tell me it's going to end the same way it's always ended. So I don't know. I think, like, for me, I feel the only position I feel extremely strong on is less about them and more that Dak's not the problem. I'm still very much a Dak guy. I'm still very much a person who believes that, if you look at the other, conference finalists from last year, you have Patrick Mahomes, who's probably the greatest quarterback to ever live, who can make, wine out of water. And then there's everybody else. When Jalen Hurts has 3 weapons in his offense. And Brock Purdy, when he beat the Cowboys, has 3 receivers and CMC and George Kittle. And 2 receivers and CMC and George Kittle. And then, Joe Burrow has the best 3 receivers, 3 receiver set in the game. So, like,
Jamar Chase is such a monster, man. He's so good.
And like T. Higgins on all but 5 other teams would be a number 1. Tyler Boyd overqualified as a 3. So everybody bags on Dak for not carrying the offense, but who is other than Patrick Mahomes? Who could do that? Nobody else can. And so I really do believe that if the schemes are there, Dak will be fine because Dak's getting a little bit of help. I'm not terribly worried about him, but it's just what we do here, man. We scapegoat. It's always somebody's scapegoat. It's always Tony's fault, and now it's Dak's fault.
It's not Mike or Dan's fault, though. It's not going to be one of those two. It's not Mike or Dan. No, not those two.
Well, it might be Mike's fault this year. I feel like if it doesn't happen this year, it might be Mike's fault this year. I don't think it's going to be Dan's fault this year. It might be Mike's fault this year. It's never Jerry's fault, though. Never Jerry's fault, though.
That's right.
Never their fault.
That's right. If one person I don't have any questions about, it's about number 11. I'm good with Micah Parsons. He's good with me. All good to go on the defense. I think they're going to be spectacular. But you're right. The offense is the big question with the change that they have and what they brought in with Brandon Cooks. Dak Prescott, 15 interceptions, just cannot happen again this upcoming season if they're going to go where they want to go. All right, before I let you go, I can't get out of here without talking just a smidge of pro wrestling because
there we go.
It's a really fascinating time in the business, Mike. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got AEW doing their thing. Rumors of a 3rd show apparently about to happen.
Oh, that's not a rumor. That's happening.
Yeah, that's right. The AEW collision. Shout out to CM.
It's just the rumor of CM Punk is coming back, which feels like that might happen too. So
shout out to the Young Bucks and Tony Khan. Good luck with that. But for the WWE, this whole Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns, now insert Brock Lesnar into it. I'm not going to lie to you, Mike. What are we doing here? I think they missed a moment at WrestleMania in Hollywood.
Of course they did.
Like,
it was a layup. Listen, it's one thing when they didn't pull the trigger on Sami Zayn. And I was fine with it because I was like, look, the Sami Zayn story is really a Sami Kevin story. It is really about getting them back together. And if you do this right, and I thought they stuck the landing with that. I thought they stuck the landing on ending the Usos' reign, on having them finally ride together as tag champs. It was beautiful. That's fine. But you can avoid pulling the trigger on Sami Zayn as world champ because you got Cody in the hole. And that's what we all thought, right? This is the moment. Cody was mega over. It was guaranteed money. Everybody wanted it. how do you, I mean, I know how you fumble the bag because it's WWE and they do this all the time with their stars. And certainly with Vince McMahon back in the picture, it's going to happen even more often because, I think we all saw when Triple H was running NXT, there was a lot more reason to trust that there was a plan with some of these younger guys versus the Vince era. But yeah, they fumbled it. And now they're trying to keep them warm. And I do think he'll eventually get a world title run because this is going to follow the sort of the path that, Drew McIntyre took a while to get the title that he should have had. Bray Wyatt eventually got the belt. But Sami Zayn eventually got payoff for being mega over. It just took a long time. But when you do that and you'll pull the trigger at the apex of it, you don't make those A++ stars. You make those B+ to A- stars. And that's valuable. Cody's going to draw. Cody's still over. Everybody still loves Cody. People know Cody didn't book himself to not win the title. But it's just, if you want to make money and you know that Roman Reigns is probably going to go do movies sooner than later, who's filling that vacuum? Who's replacing that void? And here it was on a silver platter, man, and you don't pull the trigger. It's mind-blowing. I can't believe that they didn't do it. So here's the funny thing. My wife is not a huge wrestling person, but she knows I love it. And she likes Roman, Roman, you may not know this, Kevin. Roman, a very handsome man with long hair. The ladies like Roman.
My wife reminds me constantly, yes.
Yeah, my lady's no exception to that.
Yeah.
So she'll watch Roman. And it's funny because we've had probably, how long this run's been going, right? I'm not even kidding. I probably had 3 or 4 pay-per-views where I'm popping in and I'm like, all right, Roman's on. I think this is when he loses. And then she's like, you keep saying that. He never loses. And then finally we get to Cody. And so I did, when Cody was on the Independents, I did a story for The Ringer that was about Cody and about his father, Dusty Rhodes. And this was a very big story on Dusty at the time, or Cody and Dusty, and made a lot of waves. And so I know Cody a little bit. And so certainly I've been invested in his journey because I really, wrote 8,000 words with him, but he went to the Indies because he never thought he'd be back in WWE. So I really, just on a human level, I would have loved to see him have that moment because I know how hard he's worked for. I know how much it would mean to him and his family. But, I'm thinking like you. I'm like, this is found money. This is the biggest layup of all time. So I'm telling my wife, I'm like, this is it. And so she likes Cody a bit because she knows that I've known him. And she likes Roman. She likes Roman. And then my jaw drops when Cody doesn't go over. And she's just laughing. She is thinking it's the funniest thing in the world because she's like, you keep thinking he's going to lose, and he never loses.
Oh, so she's my God.
The big Roman fan living her best life over there.
And it sounds like it's going to continue because he's going to get past the 1,000-day mark. In fact, it's coming up here in a few days, actually. He's going to pass 1,000 days as champion.
We should have known that the WWE would be stupid enough to just make that be what this is all about. Like,
they love their
arbitrary number.
Yes.
Just an arbitrary number instead of how can we make a bankable star for the next 5 to 7 years. And sure enough, I mean, we all sit there. Well, how are they to break the titles up? How do they break the titles up? AJ Styles even said it in an interview this week. It's a secondary title what they're creating now because they can't figure out what to do. They back themselves in a corner and they're taking the coward's way out. Just brutal, man. Absolutely brutal.
Mike, tell the folks where they can find you, what you got going on these days, man.
DMagazine, if you go over there, you go to sports, you'll see everything we do at Strong Side, covering everything we do in Dallas, where I'm writing and I'm editing a killer team. You can find me on Twitter, Mike Likes Sports, 77 Minutes in Heaven, over at The Athletic, where we're talking Mavs all the time. And you never know, popping up on the occasional radio show near you. Hopefully I'm back on with you. Reg wasn't on when I came on last time. So I got to do it with the full-time crew with you and Reg sometime.
That's right. We'll definitely have to make that happen. Mike is a terrific sports editor for DMagazine. Got a lot of amazing perspective on all things DFW sports. And I was so ready to have this conversation, and I'm so glad I was able to have it with Mike.
Thank you for having me, man. Pleasure was mine.
Mike Piellucci, sports editor for DMagazine, got to join me here on the Gray Area podcast. Mike, thank you so much for the time, man. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yes, sir. Thank you, KG. Anytime.